Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Adrienne Stanford. I'm the Director of Operations with Alternative Solutions. Thanks for joining us today for one of our educational webinars. We've really enjoyed presenting these lunch and learns this year and hope that they're helpful and interesting for all of you guys. Our topic today is data services. Spencer Gibson, who is one of our senior Salesforce business analysts, is going to dig in and touch on some Informatica, MuleSoft, and TIBCO. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put those in the chat box and we will get to those as Spencer moves along. With that being said, I will hand this over to Spencer so that he can get started.
Thank you, Adrienne, and thanks everybody for joining us. So like Adrienne said, we're going to talk about data integration and how we look at data within our orgs and how we move it appropriately and make it accessible to the people who need to use that data. So most of us come from a Salesforce background that attend this webinar, and so you'll probably have heard of REST and SOAP, and those are the basic APIs that we use to move data between organizations, most commonly when we're talking about Salesforce. And this looks a lot more complicated than we'll get into, but basically you have a service out there on some kind of a web server like Salesforce or your website or any place that holds data. And it allows another application or service to make calls to it. Get or retrieve calls where it pulls information, or post, or we might say update calls in Salesforce where we go out and we update, say, a contact record with new information. And so all we're doing as we build out these systems in Informatica, MuleSoft, TIBCO at the end of the day is it's just kind of an interface put over that API. So we don't have to know quite as much code as we would if we were just developing that API natively. But the API is the general way we move data, and REST and SOAP are going to be the most common. More orgs, I would say, probably do use manual code through these APIs than even the big data integrators probably. So let's look at why we would use data integration, what we gain from it. First, we gain the ability to merge data. So we have orders in SAP, but our customer service team's working in Salesforce. We want to be able to track problems and feedback aligned with those orders. And so integration allows us to take the data from those two pieces and make a connection between them. So that's ultimately going to save us time. It's going to save resources because we don't have agents using multiple systems. We don't have to buy logins to multiple systems even, and user authentication. We don't have a lot of IT support processes. It's just going to save time in a whole lot of places. We're going to see communication improve across the organization. So when we're talking about a record, like an order, if we can see the information from the back office team, from customer service, from every different group within your organization right on that record, communication's obviously going to be better. And we can create reports without logging into multiple accounts, buying multiple login instances. And it's just, the report's going to mean a whole lot more. More importantly, even if you go out and you drop all this data into Excel or even Tableau Desktop, a nice program for reporting, it's going to be harder to make sense of it than if it is all in one place, easy to access. So Informatica, that's probably going to be the one that that's probably the biggest name in Salesforce. They work with a whole lot of large companies. And so what Informatica is doing is and MuleSoft and TIBCO, Scribe are going to be similar. It's sitting in the middle of all of these different data sources, and it's figuring out where data needs to move. It's processing different business rules on it. And so as we talk about these different integration providers, that's how we need to think of them, as kind of sitting in the middle as our data shepherds or data stewards in the cloud. So what are some ways we do this? So manual data integration, contact tracing would come to mind here. When we build out a contact tracing platform, we have these records where we need to go out and talk to people who are sick or potentially sick. And then we have a person call them and interact with them, and we manually collect that data. Or maybe we do that through an automated service like text messaging with Twilio. Even then, we would mostly look at that as manual data integration, because we have user input, and then ultimately that's going directly into a system. Middleware data integration. Something acts as a mediator. So we talked about Informatica being kind of a middleware data integrator on the last slide. It's just sitting in the middle. It's processing that data, moving it to the right places, and maybe performing, again, business rules. Application-based. So this would be something like Salesforce for Outlook. We add that application into Outlook. When we get an email or open an email, it says, oh, I know that email address. Let's go look in Salesforce. Salesforce, do you know that email address? And if it does, it provides some data about that contact in Salesforce. Also, you can push back to Salesforce from that application records of the emails or other things through the application. So that's general application based. And then we have uniform access integration. So this focuses on translation process. This is generally speaking where you're going to have multiple one data source going out to multiple places. So maybe Salesforce is your data source, and Dynamics 365 is, you don't use it quite so much. It's just your ERP. So when it needs access to that information, it's just going to go out and you treat Salesforce as the uniform database. Or maybe like a legal client that we had not long ago, you have data security issues, requirements that you have. And so you have to have all of your data on site. And so Salesforce and all of your other data applications are going to have to go out each time they need data and talk to it on your site, because we can't let that data be housed elsewhere. So this is a look at Tibco's Scribe product and how we build an API in it. And there's code and mapping happening underneath this. But I like Scribe because it's one of the simplest things for people who maybe are not quite used to development and don't understand the ins and outs. This is kind of like your quicker learning curve maybe to get up to. So here we're waiting for our marketing leads software lead to push us a lead. When we get that, we need to push it to our production SQL server. So we're going to create a lead. We're going to say, hey, we're going to perform some logic. So is there an account associated with this? If not, we're going to create one. If there is, then we're going to go ahead and look that account up. Then we're going to build out the reply. So we have to build into code what we need to send to the other API. And then we're going to send it over to that SQL server, and the SQL server is going to commit it, and maybe have other logic processed on it by something like Heroku. So let's look at some forms of data integration, and that gray doesn't come across very well, but data warehousing. So data warehousing just applies, is the idea of data integration. It's the idea that data is in multiple sources, but multiple sources might need to access that data, and we have to figure out a way to translate or move the data. Consolidation, that blue shows up a little better. And I threw out our Texas cowboy for you, Adrian there. So consolidation just means we want less storage locations. The legal company that we were speaking of would be a good example here. They wanted only the one place. And so there's some complexity that comes from that. If you've got multiple different systems interacting with one data source, you have to, the concurrency causes issues like worrying about things being overwritten, or if it takes multiple seconds to get there and they both get there in the same time frame. Lots of considerations there. Propagation. So maybe we have SAP, and we're processing some orders in there. And we don't want to mess with the orders in Salesforce, but we want to have access to the information about them in Salesforce. So we're just going to push copies of that data out, either in real time or maybe once a day. And we're going to have access to it. And there are less restrictions there. So sometimes we do that just because the technical complexity is a lot more manageable. Virtualization, this is a really neat concept. So let's say I build a Lightning component that I really like. And I have a customer who, some of their people are in Dynamics 365, and we need to embed that Lightning component in 365. So I can go to my developer wizards and have them build that out for me. So we can actually access our Salesforce component virtualized inside of the Dynamics 365 environment. And that's a way of data integrating without truly integrating the data. It's doing it more through the systems and applications you're interacting with the data with. And then data federation, and that's just, you'll hear this idea, federated data, all the time, and it comes with a lot of thoughts to it. But at the end of the day, what it really just means is it's data that you have developed a method and a process for, and that you know is clean and accurate because it's going through that process. And so that data has been brought into the federation and treated appropriately under the rules of that federated plan. This is a look at AnyPoint Studio. So that's going to be inside of MuleSoft. And this is just another look, kind of like Tibco, but this shows you a little bit more depth of, as we're going through these processes and performing that logic, we have different metadata we're going to pull over. So if we're sending code we've built, we've got to also attach the subclasses or any kind of helper files that the code references. Because if the code doesn't have the static resources, then it's not going to run. So we have to pull over metadata. We have to do field mapping, things like that, the step inside. And this is also where we're going to process business logic that we might have. So what are some challenges we look at in data integration? One side of the coin is going to be sourcing. And so sourcing comes to a few things. We have external data systems we're using. Maybe a partner database, maybe a national database of someone who provides prices for a raw material or something. Through this external data system, we may have certain levels of confidence. We may have holes in our data, but so integrating that can be a challenge. Legacy systems is something we see common. Somebody who was an absolute tech genius built us a program 30 years ago, and we're still running on it because we can't replicate it. It's difficult and it's going to cost a lot of money. So we're still using it, but it may not have an API, or it may only have an API that isn't compatible with the cutting edge system that we look at on the other side of that coin. And so when you're integrating these legacy systems, your kind of run of the mill and your cutting edge systems, you run into compatibility issues and things like that that you have to work through. The other side of that coin is the process side. And the process side is actually where more people get caught up, because you can find a way to integrate into a cutting edge system. It might just be more difficult, but the first step's getting there. It's going, bringing the right teams in, making sure you have the appropriate resources in the budget and in your IT bandwidth, making sure each team is setting the goals together, and we all have a unified idea of what our goals are, and we're setting realistic timeframes and goals around it, and that you're providing the right ongoing support to your data integration, because it'd be a great world if we could just set up the API and it would work forever, but we're going to find issues. We're going to have new data introduced into the system. We're going to have new products added. And so there's going to have to be a team there to support that ongoing as well. So this is the AnyPoint Exchange inside of MuleSoft. And all of Informatica MuleSoft, you're going to have these areas to go out and get connectors. And you're going to have built-in things. So we can do an HTTP request to your Joomla or WordPress site, or go out to SAP or Salesforce. And so you're going to have these general things that they're set up to basically where you don't have to write a lot of code, which is the goal, of course, is always clicks, not code. This is a look at Tibco's. Scribe is their product for integration that we use in Salesforce. And I like Tibco a lot better because they make it a lot easier for partners like myself and our company to go out and write these APIs for programs that might have smaller user bases. And you might not have enough users to support the cost of developing that API, but if we can then resell it on this marketplace, and you can spread that cost out between hundreds of businesses or tens of businesses even, it makes it a lot more manageable. So I really like Tibco for their marketplace, similar to Salesforce and theirs. There's just a whole lot of extensibility you can find on the marketplace where you don't have to have a full team of developers, even if you might need some light consultant help. This is a look at the Red Hat's. So this is a Linux kind of governing board and certification board, and their look at APIs. So a lot of times our legacy systems are going to run on Linux servers. So this is a good model to understand. And the left circle is kind of your initiation, and the right circle is your ongoing life cycle. So we'll just walk through that. We strategize what we need. We set our goals, make our business requirements. We have our developers design and mock that up. We test that. We implement it. And during implementation, we might go back and do a lot more development. Even we make changes and we bring in, as we're testing, we're bringing in the whole organization and getting their feedback. We then go and we deploy it. We make sure it's secure, and then we put into process our management rotation. And during our management rotation, once it's actually live, we still do our discovery. We go out to the different teams that are impacted by the data and say, is it working? Is it moving over? Are you having issues? The famous, we have a data team and I come in as a consultant. This happens so very often, even in Fortune 5 and 100s. You go in and the customer service team hasn't had this piece of data working, and somehow the data team doesn't know, and it's never worked since they've implemented it. So we have to do that discovery. We have to go in and develop fixes for those issues. We then have to consume the data, monitor the data, and ultimately monetize the data. And monetize might mean directly monetize, or it might mean make transformative changes within our organizations around that data through use of reporting software and Tableau. So this is Informatica's on-cloud software. So this is the old school where a lot of times I would even have to go on site to a corporate headquarters to even work with it. But you have your field lists, you have your metadata, and you're able to build it. Luckily now we have Informatica Cloud, which is a much more user-friendly and modern interface and a little easier to work with. So here we've got Salesforce accounts and some SQL orders. The SQL is your master record, so it's the important data. Your SFDC or Salesforce accounts are your details, so they're dependent on the master record. So we're going through a process. We're doing field mapping to say, hey, we need the orders brought over. Let's map them by account number because those are the same in both systems. What are our unique identifiers, things like that. And this walks us through the process of moving data from one organization to another. And you can see there's some calculations happening there at the end before it actually commits the data. So maybe it's, we're in euros and it's translating it to another currency, or maybe it's rolling up multiple orders into a master order, but we can perform logic there as well. This is just a larger look at your field mapping. This looks a lot like if you're using data loader in Salesforce or the data integration wizard, or even maybe if you have demand tools or something like that. So I hope that's an interesting look at how data gets moved around in an organization, some of the common things there. As you're looking at which data integration provider you might use, you know, I'd look at those marketplaces. I think they're really neat starts. See what systems you have and where you're trying to move your data. But ultimately, this is definitely a complex and confusing topic. And it's not like customer service where, you know, working a case or your sales pipeline is generally pretty similar from business to business. We all have different data storage places. We have different processes and different needs. So reach out to Adrian at info@altsalute.com. We're happy to sit down and talk to you about how you're using data now and how we might help you use it better. And we're also happy to answer any questions you have now if you want to throw them in the chat box up to the top right. I know we went through a lot of information in a quick amount of time there, so feel free to ask questions.
Thanks, Spencer. That was a good presentation. Lots of stuff I didn't know, so I appreciate it. As Spencer said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. If you think of something later on during the week and would like more information, please feel free to reach out to the info@altsalute.com and I'll get back to you. We'll get those questions answered. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule on this one. We'll give you guys a few minutes here or so, and if you have anything, let us know, and if not, we'll cut it short today. Spencer, do you have anything else to add, or?
I don't think so at the moment.
Okay.
I know that's a whole
there.
A lot of info in a very short amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys and girls, I think that that's probably it. Feel free to reach out to us. We enjoy any of the questions that you guys send us. And we hope that you can join us for another Lunch and Learn here soon. We seem to be doing these about every other week right now. So we'll get a topic out here soon and send it over to you all in an email. So thanks, everybody. We hope you have a great day. Thanks, Spencer.